And hello good people of the internet, it is I, Tommy Kelly. This is Adventures in Mubu, and welcome to a lovely little forest walk that I'm on right beside a stream. Well, I'm assuming it's a stream. I'm not really sure when a stream becomes a river, what the exact definition is, because it's quite wide and deep in some places, but it feels streamy to me. It has that kind of quaint stream quality rather than a river. So the anonymist, that word in me feels streams. Feels the spirit of the place is streamy. This is actually somewhere I've been a number of times. I've done a few videos here, but I took a different path, kept along the river, which I usually kind of veer off. And there's a lovely little beach down there. Well, it's kind of a man-made pretend beach, but it's nice. And yeah, all good. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about today was a kind of not a continuation, but an update on something that I talked about in last week's video, in the question and answer vlog, which was the Patreon's question and answer vlog thing that I did, where I was kind of explaining that I'm having kind of a shitty bit of a time the last while, and that things since Christmas haven't really picked up, I suppose. It's a bit windy again, so hopefully the mic thing will sort out. It did when I was on the beach, but I think I've decided today to sit directly in the direction of the wind. Anyway, but it was an amazing week kind of in the end, that even though I had all these computer issues and I felt like there was stuff being taken away from me, and I have a kind of a sense or a feeling or a shadow or a role or whatever word we want to put in these, that if I display happiness or allow myself to be happy, that it'll be taken away from me. And that kind of manifested over the week, or at least appeared to. And this is the key, I think, to what I want to talk to about. But so I had a really terrible week, really down, really, I really got into it. I really went for it. And then towards the weekend, it all kind of shifted a bit. And it shifted, and I'm not really sure why. There was a moment where this kind of role was continuing out, and it, something good was meant to happen. Something was meant to arrive, delivery or whatever, and then immediately it was taken away by they said that they did it, they delivered it, but I wasn't home. That kind of stuff, which is just common kind of a place, and so was computers breaking. But it's when you're in a mode of feeling that things are happening spitefully to you, it's hard to not see it for what it is. But I had a massive breakthrough on Monday in a forest. Surprisingly enough, in a forest. But I kind of have to backtrack a wee bit in order to explain it and put it in a bit of context. So over the last, I suppose previous to COVID, I was going to therapy. And I had spent, I think it was 12, 14 weeks with a particular therapist. And it was a kind of therapy, it was called EFT, which is, it's not the tapping one, emotional freedom technique or therapy, something. I always confuse what they're for, but it's not the tapping one. It's the idea that your negative emotions that you have, that you attack them in a sense with different emotions, but equal strength. So you would attack, it's big about assertive anger, getting angry at these things so that, you gain control and stuff like that. And I didn't really enjoy it because there was an awful lot of trying to talk to people who weren't there, pretending people were sitting in chairs that weren't there. And then you had to pretend that you were these people, and it just felt utter bullshit to me. And it felt, in one sense, a bit traumatic too, because the therapist is there kind of goading you on, shouting at you to try and get angry at whoever, someone from your past. And I'm going, I'm not angry at this, that's not true that I'm not angry. I'm not getting angry at a fucking jail, because I've got angry at the person. I've got angry at the situation in my life, in my head constantly. And this feels dumb, and it kind of feels like I'm being bullied into doing this, which is, she's meant to be, in a sense, assisting you, keeping you going, but it felt like I was being forced. And it made me feel very kind of, I suppose, like childlike, being told what to do and stuff. So it was all very weird. And I ended up, when I switched roles, I started saying things that I did that ultimately weren't true. And because I was trying to, I suppose, get the thing to be over, or I was trying to give the right answers, or any of these things. I did it a couple of times. I really hated it and I didn't like it. And but we were kind of locked into this therapy because I had signed up as part of the thing it was part of a trial for this kind of thing. And in the end, she pulled the plug on it. It got very weird at the end, because I arrived one day and she just kind of said, we're not doing this anymore, but you've been bumped up the waiting list for someone else. So I don't really know, because then when I was talking to the guy who was running the trial, he said, he was talking to me as if I had left. And I goes, I didn't leave, I was told not to come back, in a sense. So I don't really know what happened. I think there was some fuck up somewhere. Then we got a new therapist, and he was brilliant because he was coming over from a CBT thing, but he also did a bit of EFT with me just to show that that there's a proper way of doing it where you don't have to do this kind of role play bullshit. But then COVID happened, obviously, and that was an entire year that I was left to fend for myself in the wild, and I had moments at the beginning of COVID. Was really nice because when you remove hierarchies or power hierarchies or whatever it is, and everyone's leveled out, then you kind of have a lot of your anxiety goes away. But as it slowly dawned on everyone that this thing wasn't going away for a while, and when it did go away, that wasn't if the world was going to change as we all hoped, then we would go into a new kind of golden age. We're going to go back to the same shitty world that we'd been in. So yeah, it kind of took the toll on me. And since when I got COVID at Christmas, I got ferried down and never really managed to pick myself up. But there was this kind of idea that had started to be developed round in the therapy and my own stuff that I was doing with, say, Alan Chapman's Magia, the binding mechanism or the binding ritual, whatever method that's part of that, and the Pierre Grimes stuff, this philosophical midwifery, and my own kind of little takes on different things. The Russell Brand thing he did, the course he did, I can't remember who did it with, but it was recovery. I found that very helpful. I ended up being very harsh with myself on it though. That was the only thing that I took it a bit too much, that rather than trying to work on things, I kind of started seeing myself as being more of a shitty person. So I kind of amplified the critic, this inner critic thing. But some of the stuff that I had a breakthrough with that was really, really good. So anyway, I started again into therapy, I don't know now, 6 weeks ago, something like that. And we immediately got back into it and it got very hard, and there was kind of a few kind of fumbles in places where the therapist kind of took me in directions that confused me, and then ultimately he apologised for it, and he was just trying something, I suppose, or he thought that was the best way, but he said it was a clumsy way of doing things. So that was kind of, but in the end I was saying to him, I'm glad that happened because it kind of got me to where I wanted to be, if only because it taught me what I didn't want, or it gave me more of a kind of a feeling around what was going on. So anyway, I'll tell you what's going on. So there's this kind of idea that when you're young, and Pierre Grimes talks about this, so it's not just the CBT thing, it's there's a whole thing, and of course Alan Chapman followed on from that and developed the Pierre Grimes stuff, and by adding his own stuff and into binding. There's this kind of sense that when you're a child, you're an awful lot more able to receive kind of false notions about the world, or make conclusions about life or yourself or people or your role in the world that you don't really do as an adult, because you're just not going to be that easily take someone's word for it. But when you're a kid, there's this huge sense of authority from, say, your parents, from your peers, from siblings, from teachers and stuff. So there's this authority that you kind of assume on or take on, that even though if it doesn't feel true, it becomes true in a sense because the authority has it. And I had this real thing in my head that it was that my truth is not deemed to be true in this world because I don't have the authority. I was kind of trying to unpack that and say it was coming up, but it was to do with, because when you're a child, that you don't have the authority, and in order for you to get, I suppose, what you want or your will to be manifest in the world, you kind of have to convince someone who's in authority to believe what you believe, because then it becomes true. But the kind of downside of that is that you then need the validation of other people in order to manifest your truth in the world, because it doesn't become true until someone else believes it or someone else allows it. And that became one of these kind of false conclusions that I'd drawn about the world, that authority is the person who decides what truth is. And the problem with all of these kind of things is they're quite insidious in that's true in many ways, that the person who's in control or the winner gets to define reality, or or makes the rules that people have to follow and stuff like that. But this is more on a kind of a psychological level, that I started turning that in on myself, and started that I had no say, that my truth didn't matter, that it wasn't, that it became about not being important, not being listened to, not necessarily not being understood, because I felt that I could vocalise myself, or I could articulate my ideas well enough. It's just that the word disagreed with, and therefore not true. But so that's just one example of a number of kind of false conclusions that I brought up from childhood, and different kind of events that kind of led me to a load of different conclusions that kind of culminated in this kind of thing it's deemed an inner critic, which is the kind of protective thing that you set up as a child in order to deal with this big bad world and the people and relationships, and to kind of guide your course through it, then stays with you inappropriately when you get older and you start turning it in on yourself. So say you had a really abusive Uncle Jim, and he was very angry and shouted at you, and you learn these coping mechanisms, protective mechanisms, how to do it. What happens is that there's kind of a transmission where you then turn that on yourself, and part of you keeps that going and keeps it perpetuating. And so that you'll become more wary of these things, and it starts colouring your world and colouring your relationships and your beliefs and all of these. I find it hard to explain it properly because I'm trying not to give specific examples, because it's, although it's my life and my story and I get to, I own that, it also involves other people, and it's very public being on a YouTube. And as much as I want to be as honest as possible, I have compassion for other people, and I know I've made many mistakes and have done many bad things, or whatever is the correct word there, and not to air any dirty laundry out like that, but it's just this kind of, the notion is that as a child, people who are in authority say something or act in such a way that leads you to believe that's the truth, so you create a false conclusion about the world. So I had all of these kind of false conclusions, this inner critic. I never really warmed to that word inner critic because it sounds a bit too intellectual. There's a particular type of, when I think of critic, that I kind of like a tweed suit, English journalist, kind of, A. Mills, kind of a thing, only older, this kind of Bertrand Russell type of a character. That's not what it didn't feel like that to me. This felt more like a witch. The more I looked at it, like it felt spiteful, vengeful, malicious, vindictive. It hated me, the things it would say to me, and how quick, when you start getting really mindful about it and really trying to catch it, you would say something or see a thought would enter your head, and how quick you would criticise yourself or say something awful, or really put yourself down immediately. And it's quite horrible. And then there was a whole exercise where I just had to write out exactly what this critic or this parasite or this witch was saying to me, and it really hated me, and it was like wanted only bad things. And what I noticed over the last week, to bring it into what we're actually talking about, is that when everything was going really, really bad and computers were breaking and everything around me was breaking, and it felt like this kind of notion of that if I express happiness, that it's taken away from me, that was becoming, here's an example of it. And what I had done is that I had given supernatural abilities to this part of my brain. So, because it was claiming that it had, in a sense, control over these things, over these events. And so that when my computer broke, it was like, there you go, you fucker, you deserve that, I did that. There's a spiteful vengeance thing, as if it had done it to hurt me, to annoy me, to keep me down, to keep me in my place. And I kind of realised that, and I was going, that's, slightly, well, it's embarrassing in one way that you've kind of given supernatural abilities to a part of your brain, but when you have magical kind of outlook in life, it's, there's this fine line between magic and magical thinking in the kind of very cognitive sense, where you think, your thoughts are creating reality, not necessarily in the law of attraction sense, but close to it. But it's more like that your behaviour or who you are and the way you're thinking is causing bad things to happen, and I got caught in that kind of a trap. And when I realised that that's what I was doing, that I had attributed all of these things, just bad luck things, to a part of my brain that had, was a complex, or in Jungian terms, or was, like almost like an egregore or a servitor that had got out of hand, in that kind of classic way that you created this thought form that had gone bad. I don't think I'm explaining this too well. But it's hard to explain well, because it doesn't actually make sense. That's the problem with all of these things, that when you actually start looking at it, it doesn't make sense. Because one of the things that this inner critic was telling me is that the only way to assert my truth in the world is to get angry, and to People won't listen to you until you're angry, until you shout or whatever. But immediately then has the counter thought of anger makes you a bad person. So you can't win. So you can't have a say, because if you have a say, that makes you a bad person. But also you have to stand up for yourself, because if you don't stand up for yourself, that makes you a bad person. So it doesn't make any sense. And when you start kind of connecting these things, it just it falls apart in many ways. But it also, the kind of emotion that's with it, still makes it feel true, even though logically it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so it came to the point where it was a bad week or whatever, as I keep saying. But something kind of changed. It was around, I had an argument with my wife that she pushed me on in a good way to not, because I was going, I'm not talking about it, there's no point in talking about it, nothing's going to change, blah, 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 blah. And she goes, no, we're going to change, we're going to do something different this time. And there was this kind of notion that there is a possibility of change. And then I kind of set myself up for that. I had ordered a new power supply unit for the computer. I said, if it comes, then great. If it doesn't come, then also great, because I'm going to rearrange my life to suit this new thing. That it's not that music has been taken away from me, which was the kind of undercurrent thing, the happiness of music was going to be taken away from me because I deserve nothing but pain or suffering, whatever. Is that I'll just find a new way to do it. I'll keep going. If I can't record, fine, I'll save up, get another computer, but I have plenty of things. There's still my guitar, still my piano, still all of these things. I can make something nice happen. So that when on the Monday, when the power supply came in the computer, either worked or it didn't work, didn't matter, because I'd won. It came and it did work, surprisingly enough, which is interesting given the third chapter of issue 2 of turbine syndrome, which, being that it's a I'll talk about this some other time, but being that it's a hypersigil, it's very strange how it absolutely 100% correlated with what was going on in my life as well, as magic does. But I didn't realise it until I came out of it. So anyway, the big revelation on the Monday is I went to a forest, because the therapist was telling me that you have to get angry. I'm going to have to start getting angry with this inner critic, because it's, it's ruining my life, and it's making me sad and depressed and angry and all of these things. And so I had to get this assertive anger and really push it, and it would start off, it would feel fake, but it would bend, I would eventually get proper anger, whatever. And it's kind of, okay, right, I'll try it. I was walking through the forest and I was just kind of talking to this critic. Again, don't like that name. It doesn't describe it. And I was trying to get angry, and I was trying to really kind of tell them to fuck off. Because if someone was a friend who was saying the things that I say to myself under this guise, you would tell them to fuck off. You would tell them, go away. You would have no time for them. But it wasn't really making any difference, and it just felt wrong. Not wrong. It felt inadequate. It felt the wrong approach, or there was something. And then I was just kind of sitting, and there was a tree in the forest that's very like an elephant. There's a load of kind of elephant trunk type branches that come off, and I was just kind of sitting there. So I just kind of notion hit me that what I'm doing is essentially just the exact same role again. So it's me being angry at myself, me trying to get rid of a part of myself, or shouting at a part of myself, or being angry, or being aggressive, or trying to get rid of all this. But it was the opposite way. Rather than that part of my brain doing it to me, I was trying to do it to this. And I was going, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm stopping being angry at myself. I'm not having this recapitulation, this constant role where I just shout at myself and tell myself I'm a prick, or I'm a horrible person. And even if it is, the kind of part of me that, isn't doing things in the most skillful manner. And it was just kind of an immediate kind of sense of this blackened, burnt figure, which was me, a kind of a teenagery thing that he'd kind of really spiteful, vengeful, hurt, deeply hurt, lashing out, looking for revenge, looking for vengeance. If you've ever read Goodnight Pun Pun, as Pun Pun goes through, he gets darker and darker and more kind of tarry and black, and it was like that. And this was the kind of physical, in my head, manifestation of what this critic was. And it was me as a teenager who'd just been so hurt by life and by things that happened, and that's what he turned into, this horrible, resentful, spiteful, lashing out, wanted to hurt everything, wanted to destroy everything, wanted to in a sense, wanted to be validated that life is shit. And rather than being angry at him, and I just was so in love with him, just so understanding and so compassionate for him. And started crying him now. I can see him emotional now about it. It's just like, so rather than pushing him away, I was like, come on, come home, come over here, come back. And integrate him, love him. Because what turned, a lot of the thing that turned him into him was anger from other people and shouting and that. And he goes, I'm not shouting at you anymore. That's what made you, been told all these things that you've been told. And so I'm going to love you. And it was immensely healing. And he could just, the stuff that just came out of me. And I just felt like, one thing I have an internal dialogue is where it's mostly, I say we, when I'm referring to myself. And there was a mental switch where I goes, I'm going to do, it's I, because I'm taking control of all of this. I'm not allowing all these different parts to be in control. And so I turned it into an I, with the recognition of the thing. I started just holding his hand, mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever you want, and just tell him to come home. And at that point, from over this side of my sphere, young kid, me, the tree, something that before the terrors of the world had turned him into this black, charred, spiteful mess. And he was afraid to come out, so I told him to come out, and I told him to come home. I was holding his hand. I'm walking through the forest, holding these two guys' hands. Young me, fucked up me, current me. Just an unbelievable release of emotions as I walked down, of immense compassion for myself, for the past, for other people, for all of life and all of humanity and all of these things. And just, you can tell it's a week later. It's over a week later, is it? No, it's not even a week later. It's a couple of days later. It was Monday. Today's Thursday when I record this. That it's still here. It's so present. And so kind of walked out of the forest, and then as I left, I put the two of them in my heart. But something dramatically changed after that. That it's just that when that voice, when I hear the inner critic, or when I hear that thing in my head that tells me I'm a shitty person, or that whatever it is that I'm criticising myself or destroying myself about, it's a teenage me, a hurt, vengeful, reactory me. I get that rather than this other voice, and I can understand that and have compassion for it. And it's kind of like as if I've become a big brother to this guy, or you've taken on you're fostering a kind of a troubled teenager, and you're trying to show them that life can be better than this, and they're just kind of fostering of that. And so I'm aware of that, while it still feels external, but not in any way the external. It doesn't feel like it's happening to me and I've no choice in it. It's this voice. I know what it is. I understand it. I know why it's like that. I know why it became like that. I understand why it's lashing out and what it needs. And again, with the kind of kid, kind of nurture that and to allow that to kind of bring happiness and whatever into the world, or whatever he kind of wanted, to allow myself to be happy. And I just noticed I'm running out of time here, so wrap it up, Tommy, with your yapping. So it was, so over the week it was just this this immense kind of soul weight loss, and this kind of feeling. And then when I went into the therapy on the Tuesday, I was a different man, and he was like so happy, and you could see that there's so changed. And it's kind of still kind of working out what it all is and all that, and I'm worrying that maybe this will go away, or I'll revert back to old things. But I don't think I can revert back, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I have had situations where I normally would go into this role, or would normally fall for the trap and all this, and I haven't, and I've seen it. I've seen what it is, and I was able to maintain my kind of composure in it, my mindfulness and all that kind of thing. So I think this is huge for me. It's proper life-changing insight, revelation about me, how I talk to myself, what I think of myself, and how I've been allowing false conclusions about me and the world ruin my life, essentially. So that's a long way of saying I had one of the worst weeks of my life, which turned into one of the best moments of my life. And that's not to say that I don't think you have to have shitty times to get these insights. And I don't think they're orchestrated in order for you. It's not, oh, that had to happen so you'd understand that. I don't think that's the case. I think these things happen, and there is a chance within these things that you can understand them. Not that they happen so that you understand them. I think that's, again, magical thinking that's probably not healthy. I have to unpack this magical thinking versus magic thinking, because there's a delineation between the two, but one which is very unhealthy and one which I think is healthy, because definitely your thoughts create the world, but probably not always in the way we as magicians or wizards think, but also to do. It's very strange, but it's just the magical thinking thing can be quite a destructive thing when it's reverted on yourself, or you kind of give the agency away from it. So yeah, that's just kind of where it is. I hope some of that made sense. It probably didn't make as much sense as it could have, but still in the middle of unpacking it and all that. Yeah, I feel great, lads. That's a real Irish thing. I feel great, folks. People, good people. Incidentally, lads, when people say it in Ireland, well, at least me, it doesn't have a gender. It's like dude, although some people get annoyed about dude saying it is a gender thing. Anyway, good people. Feel really good. Like a weight has been lifted off me, a confidence, a humour has returned, a lightness. Like, non-fucked up Tommy's really nice to be around internally. He's some nice ideas about the world, and so I'm enjoying being him now. And hopefully I get it, I hope it stays, and I hope I'm able to keep mindful of it and keep it all up or whatever. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. I think that's long enough, and well done to you if you got to the end. Be well, my friends, and hope your shadow work goes as successful as mine has, and that you don't need to be as hard on yourself as I was. But if the assertive anger thing's not working for you, if the telling it to fuck off and I'm not doing that anymore, all that doesn't, try loving yourself. mad idea, right? Try being compassionate. Try to see what this hurt part of you wants, and then give it that. And then integrate it into your soul, hold its hand, put it back into your heart, and ask it to come home. It's the end of the day, we all want to come home, right? So, good people of the internet, be well, and may our best days be ahead, big time.